Hi doll faces, I've been away for a little while. I went to a music festival which was fantastic for a long weekend with my friends. It was just lovely. And I've come back into a situation where I'm feeling that there are some transitions going on with regard to my chronic pain and my back injury, which I know I've discussed on the channel before in another video quite some time ago. And I wanted to talk a little bit more just from a really organic place about what I'm feeling at the moment with regard to my spirituality and its connection with what I'm going through physically. Just because I feel like there's a few things that I really need to get out, and I've tried journaling about it a little bit, and I've tried also formulating a timeline for myself of everything that has taken place since 2003 when I actually sustained the injury to now, so that I can get a better grasp on what exactly the situation is, and kind of allow myself to absorb and permit myself to acknowledge everything that I've really been through with it. Because when you are suffering with chronic pain and it goes on and on for, what you feel is a really indefinite period, after a while it kind of feels like the days mesh together and kind of blend together into a nothingness of what I can only describe as various different notches on a spectrum of pain. And it's like I'm aware in my own life that my back pain is something that I think about every day. It's something that I have to assess and explore every day. It's something that a day never goes by when I don't have to acknowledge the pain, assess the pain, work out how best to deal with that pain, really check in with my body and check in with my mind-body connection, and also to make sure that my attitude is positive and that I'm maintaining a decent mindset which is conducive to being able to deal with this pain without falling into things like victimhood and apathy and resentment and things that I know in my heart of hearts are not helpful to the process that I'm going through. And that can be very difficult. A lot of the time you kind of aren't able to do that. You don't feel that you're able to do that. You kind of just collapse into this day after day after day tedium, monotony of checking in with your pain. And I don't know about anybody else, but for me, with my chronic pain and with everything that I'm going through on a daily basis, I'm really careful that I don't talk about it too much and that I don't pay too much active attention to it, because I don't, frankly speaking, I don't want to bore anybody with what I'm dealing with. I'm completely aware that the pain is something that I'm processing through my consciousness and through my physical experience, and I don't want anyone else to have to put up with hearing about this pain constantly, because I'm sure it can be boring, and I'm sure it can also be very frustrating for the people in my life who love me and who don't see any way in which they can help me other than just to be supportive and to tell me that I'm doing well with it. There is no magic wand, forgive the pun, coming from a pagan witch. There is no magic wand that one can wave to really get rid of this pain. I am having what I would call a transitory physical experience at this moment. Source energy is kind of putting itself into this vessel, and this vessel has problems. This vessel is not 100% okay. I am experiencing pain, and I don't want other people to have to feel like they need to absorb that experience constantly through their own consciousness. So that's something that I'm also becoming very wary of, is that I need to find outlets for my emotion. I need to find outlets for my fear. I need to find outlets for the ways in which I'm scared that my body is failing, and I'm scared that I'm not having the level of control over my body that I used to. I need to find those outlets without putting pressure on anyone else to an overt extent. I feel like I need to make sure that I'm not burdening anybody else, or that I'm not putting anyone else under undue stress by making them feel like, I'm so terrified and I'm so pent up with my own experience that there's nothing that these people can do for me. Because of course that's not true. They're a perfect support system, and they allow me to vent and they allow me to express and to be who I need to be in the moment. But by the same token, I am always thinking, as somebody who loves those people, that I don't want to have to drag them through the muck of what I'm experiencing, and I don't want it to be on their mind all the time. So I'm trying to find that perfect place between being able to vent and being able to be authentic about what I'm going through, and at the same time making sure that it doesn't overwhelm them and that it's not overbearing for them. And also recently I've been reading quite a bit about authenticity. I've noticed that it's this pattern that's come up a lot, whereby people start to resent the word authentic, and they start talking about how the word authentic and the use of the word authenticity actually in itself isn't that authentic, because, you know, we are who we are in the moment, and there is no one specific core version of ourselves necessarily. Our psyches are incredibly complex. Now, while I understand that that's true, and I understand why people have an issue with the word authenticity, for me, I think it's about semantics. I think it's about the way we're actually seeing the word and filtering it through our particular consciousness. So, for example, the way I see authenticity is basically, I feel that at this point in my life, in my late 20s, and I think this is true for most people, we are coming into a sphere of influence in our consciousness whereby we're pretty comfortable with what our core principles and what our core values are, what our morals are, and what we feel is okay by us according to our moral compass and what is not necessarily. And I always feel that authenticity comes into play when we note that our decision making and our way of behaving and our way of interacting with other people is in alignment with the core principles and the core ethics that we kind of can't really deny, that come to represent us and who we are and how we want to actually conduct our human experience. So for me, I totally agree that the human psyche is so complex that it's actually not possible to talk about one core authentic self. I understand that there are different moods people get into, people react to situations in perhaps unpredictable ways, people evolve as they go through different lives, the structure of the way they think about things and believe in things changes, and as a result there is no one version of yourself that you can be completely in sync with and in tune with the whole way through your life, and I think that would be quite an unrealistic thing to expect. However, what I do know is that there are core principles, core ethics, core beliefs about the way we should behave and the way that we want to put ourselves across. And those things actually come from quite a deep place. And I feel that as long as we are making our decisions and going about our business in accordance and in alignment as far as possible with those core ethics and core principles, that's when authenticity really comes into play. I'm not afraid of the word authenticity, and I'm not ashamed to use it. I think that it's an important word, and I don't think people actually use it enough. I think that a lot of the concepts and the context in which it's used can be kind of misleading. It's almost as though we're trying to drill somebody into a really specific hole that totally just defines them, and we kind of don't want to accept that people are far more complex than that and things are not as monochrome as that. Whereas for me, I don't see authenticity that way. I see it as fluid. I see it as malleable according to the circumstances that are taking place. And I don't think that asking somebody to be authentic or encouraging somebody to be authentic actually has a great deal to do with asking them to maintain this one core persona, or asking them to strip all of their persona and their ego away and just work from soul level. You know, I don't think it really means that. I think people have kind of adopted this really negative view of what it means to talk about being authentic, when really for me, I think the idea of being authentic just means going with what you feel to be true in your heart and making sure that when you're making decisions, they align themselves with what you really feel deep down, what you really believe in, what you really stand for. And of course that changes, and of course it evolves, and that's fine. But no matter how many versions of yourself you undergo, no matter how many layers you strip back, no matter how many skins you shed, you still have those values and ethics. They just evolve with you, and it's always important to align with them and check in with them when you're making important decisions. So that's kind of how I see authenticity, but I'm going off track in a sense. What I really wanted to talk about actually was, I really wanted to just say that I'm finding it very difficult lately, and it's a challenge that I'm going through, and I think there's some kind of a level of shift behind it, or a level of transition behind it, which I'm kind of grateful for, because I think it's a chance for me to learn something about myself and what I'm going through with my human experience. But I really think that the pain level that I'm experiencing and the difficulties and complexities that I'm going through with my back injury, and whatever the hell it is that's going on back there with my joints and my nerves and my bones and my muscles, is really helping me to get to grips with how I view spirituality in terms of how it affects my worldview and how it affects my view of my human experience. I think a lot of people only want to look at their pain from a biomedical perspective. They want to look at what they can put into their system, what they can ingest into their system to get everything going properly. And they want to talk about what is available within the medical community that can make them, that can fix them, that can get them back to normal, get them back to the former state of being before the pain came. And I think that the reason that a lot of people talk about whole person-centered medical attention is because obviously mindset and attitude have a lot to do with the way we perceive pain and the way we process the pain we go through, and the way we pick our lives up and restructure our lives after we've experienced incredibly intense pain, which has a profound effect on things like your self-confidence, for example. It has a profound effect on your sense of fragility and vulnerability and exposure to the world. It has a profound effect on your perception of what you're capable of doing. It has a profound effect on your sense of strength or weakness, which is a huge thing for me at the moment. Just trying to get to grips with the difference between what I'm able to do in my bodily functions and what I'm able to do with my mind. Just trying to overcome these really difficult ideas, which are to do with how fragile I really am and how much care I really need and how much I can really succeed with and achieve in my earthly life because of what's been going on with my body, and these problems are just worsening for me. The last year and a half, 2 years, have been, I will admit, incredibly scary in terms of the level of pain that I'm experiencing and how unpredictable and unexpected it can be at times. It really can be. At the moment, my relationship with my body is incredibly difficult because I'm really not sure what it wants or what its goddamn problem is. So a lot of the time I see my body as an enemy, particularly when I'm going through these extremely potently, intensely painful back spasms that come over me. And frankly, when they come over me, I collapse to the floor. If I'm standing up, I just literally collapse to the floor. There is no way to stand up with that level of pain. I don't have any control. It's like looking at a fish on the deck of a boat. That's what it looks like when I have the spasms. And because of the way they look and because of how distressing they are for me to go through, I try to do everything in my power to avoid feeling this pain, which means that I have become very distrustful of my body. I don't use my body to the extent that I can because I'm so terrified of getting the spasms. I'm so terrified of getting the pain. And when I went to my latest bout of physio a few months ago, my physiotherapist said to me, you know, you can use your body a lot more than you think you can, but you are just completely terrified. You are rigid. You are locked up tight because you are so scared of experiencing this pain. And she's right, I am. And when I began yoga, I think that was a massive leap of faith for me, absolutely massive leap of faith, because I am not confident and I'm not comfortable with challenging my physicality because I just want to avoid the pain, because the pain is just so overwhelming and it kind of makes me lose my mind. I mean, that is how severe it is. It's a very strange feeling. It's not only pain, it's full-on weirdness. It's like a physical detachment from the body altogether. And I'm so concerned with trying to avoid this and trying to prevent it and trying to help myself to get rid of it and kind of hide myself away from it, that I don't challenge my body in the way that I could do. And I know that that's true. So when I started yoga, I realised that it was a major challenge for me and that I really had succeeded in being brave enough to challenge my physicality and to try and maintain a mind-body connection. And when you have chronic pain and when it's unpredictable and you're really not entirely sure what brings it on, what the variables and the factors are that contribute to it, you just know that it's been going on for a long time and it's becoming increasingly more erratic. It's very difficult to even accept that a mind-body connection might help. Ultimately, you start to think of your body as the enemy. You do. And it's a form of self-loathing. And I think it's something that's very important to acknowledge. A lot of people talk about self-loathing as involving our relationship with our emotions or our relationship with what we're capable of doing with our lives or how we perceive ourselves according to the limiting beliefs we were left with as children or in our formative years, whatever. We talk about self-loathing as being a loathing of the heart or the soul or the mind. But in fact, when you direct anger, and it's very illicit, very seething anger, towards your body, towards your physical self, that is actually also a form of self-loathing, I believe. And I think I've been indulging in that, and I've been continuously indulging in that, because when I get these spasms or when I get these days where I can't walk, and I've had 3 of these days in the last 3 months. This is kind of why I'm making this video and putting this out there, just to try and empathise and make a connection with anyone else out there who might be dealing with this kind of thing. When I get these days, I hate my body. I even, a couple of weekends ago, when I had a very severe ongoing bout of spasms, which rendered me unable to use my legs for quite a few hours, I said to my boyfriend, I feel like my body is a cage. And I'm trapped in this cage. I feel like inside, in my soul, I'm dancing, I'm moving around, I have that freedom. And trapped in here, I feel like I don't belong in here. I feel like it's not to do with me, and I feel like it's hateful, and I feel like it's really restricting me. It's restricting my soul's ability to fly where it wishes to fly, to do what it wishes to do, to express itself according to the state that it's in. I really sometimes feel like my body is a cage, like it has very little to do with who I am. And the more that I project that loathing onto my body, and that resentment and that apathy and that anger and that full-on dismissive feeling of God, if I wasn't in my body, I'd kick my body. It's such a feeling of resentment, and I know now that it's a form of self-loathing. I know that it's not helping, but it's so difficult to pull yourself out of it when you're going through pain that is that overwhelming. I think the reason that doctors talk a lot about the importance of whole person centered care, the importance of being holistic and of not talking about things from a purely biomedical perspective, is because you learn a lot about your patients from understanding how they view things spiritually. First of all, if you're dealing with somebody that's suffering with long-term chronic pain, you need to understand a little bit of something about what gives their life meaning so that you can really tap into that. And somebody doesn't necessarily have to consider themselves to be spiritual to believe that they have a life that has meaning. But normally a doctor will ask, what your spiritual leanings are, what your spiritual feelings are. And if you don't have any, they will ask you, what do you think gives your life meaning? What is the real priority when you strip everything back? What is it that's truly important to you? I think also that, of course, a lot of people have restrictions with regard to the kind of care that they choose and the kind of care that they receive based on their spiritual beliefs, and it's important for a doctor to know that too. I think it's important for doctors and medical staff and alternative therapists and complementary therapists to understand that for a lot of people, spirituality is central to some of the choices that they make in their care, and it's also central to the way that they actually perceive pain and think about pain. So for all of these reasons and more that I probably can't think of right now, it's really important to talk to a patient about what their spiritual leanings are and about how they feel about the concept of pain. And a lot of the time I think to myself, when I'm going through extremely intense physical pain, I think to myself things that I've read in books about how pain is all about mind over matter, and about how the spirit is stronger than the flesh, and all of these different things about people who manage to find themselves in a situation where they can undo their physical pain or they can somehow get beyond it. And I think it's kind of dangerous to fixate on those things too much, because if you're going through some really sincere physical pain and there is clearly something wrong with your body that needs attention, then it can be really easy to berate yourself even more on the basis that there are these other people out there who are not letting pain get in their way, and they're really kind of moving forward. And a lot of stories about people who use their spirituality to forge forward with their pain, or even just break through their pain, and they recognise that pain is a matter of their mind frame, a mindset, for example. I don't find that it's helpful for me to think about those things too often, because I'm completely aware that there is something profoundly awry when it comes to my injury. I was absolutely fine before 2003, and to be honest with you, before I actually sat down and worked out the timeline of my chronic pain and actually saw how long it had been going on for, it actually was a bit of a blur to me, because as I said, when it goes on day after day after day, you don't really think to sit down and write a timeline. I mean, when doctors and consultants and specialists and physiotherapists ask me how long have you had this for, I always say to them, well, it happened when I was 19 and I'm 28 now. But that's the only thing that I say, to be honest with you. The details and the long and short of everything as it unfolded, and the different dates that I was placed on the different drugs and so on and so forth, and the major spasms that I've had, etc., are all a bit of a blur. So when I sat down the other night to actually write down a succinct timeline of what's gone on, it was actually really helpful to me, because it made me realise I have really been through something major. I have really been battling for a long time with my mind-body connection, and with trying to understand how to process pain and how to maintain a positive attitude towards it as it's going on. And when you write down this timeline of the ins and outs of your experiences since having the injury or since the pain began, it gives you a chance to give yourself credit for the incredible work that you've done. And I was very glad and happy to give myself that chance, because a lot of the time you forget about how much you have endured and how much you have persevered. And I think it's really important to think about that and give yourself some credit for it. So I was happy to do that. But now I'm in a state of being where I'm thinking about how much my spirituality really can help me deal with this pain. And I'm not talking about the attitude that I have towards it, because the attitude that I have towards what I'm going through is good. I adopt predominantly an attitude of gratitude. So what I do is I do allow myself to cry, and I do allow myself to have these little meltdowns. I actually had one yesterday. I collapsed in the middle of the city. I had a major spasm. And I have finally got home, and I did have what I would consider to be a mini meltdown. I really, really cried. I wept. My entire face was wet. The pillow was soaked. I really, really let something go. I vented, and I think that's important, and I would not deny myself that. However, a lot of the time I make sure that I keep myself in check and I keep my attitude in check. I am the kind of person that is not waiting for miracles to happen. I am seeing them unfolding in front of me every day. When I touch the base of a tree, for example, the energy that shoots through me, the nourishment that shoots through me, and the spiritual and cosmic oneness that I experience, I think is miraculous to me. And sometimes when I lose my sense of perspective, and when I really feel like I want to throw something, or I want to lash out, or I want to give in, simply even just thinking about a word like prana and then just kind of meditating off into the associations and the meanings of such a word can really be helpful to me. So I try to adopt an attitude of gratitude. I try to maintain perspective. I try to focus on the beautiful things, the inspirational things, and the things that keep me grounded and centered. But what I'm really starting to do now is I'm starting to wonder how much my mind can have control over my physical pain. And this is kind of the next big transition for me, because it's something that I've never really considered. A lot of people say things like, the spirit is more powerful than the flesh, and that you can control how much the pain affects you, and you can control, in fact, the process of pain itself. And I'm not finding that I'm able to do that. I'm in a vessel that has some difficulties that are ongoing, and I've tried to be realistic about that, and I've tried not to be too wholly transcendental. I appreciate that I am of matter, and my matter is a little bit like a crumbly breadstick or a stack of smashed Pringles, if you will. There are things going on, and I'm not willing to deny them in an effort to be some completely transcendental, cosmically linked person that's professing that they're not of flesh. I am, and my flesh is hurting. And I like to be real about that, whilst at the same time maintaining this positive attitude. But what I'm really coming to wonder is if there are parts of spirituality which I'm not yet adept at exploring, or which I may have completely overlooked even, which may give me some answers to thinking about how I may delete pain, or completely do away with pain through physical journeying, through, spiritual journeying, or some kind of spiritual evolution or spiritual consideration that I haven't yet had. And I guess I'm kind of wondering if there's anyone out there who has some opinions with regard to spirituality and pain management. As I said, not with regard to attitude, because I feel that I've got that down. I feel that my spirituality is central to who I am anyway, and it's certainly been really helpful in terms of my back injury. But I'm wondering if there are paths that I haven't yet explored which could actually potentially delete pain. And it's not because I feel that I'm at the end of my tether with my pain. I mean, God, I am, but I'm getting a lot of help. I'm having my first MRI scan next Wednesday. They have a completely fresh diagnosis for me as well. They're not entirely sure that it was what I was originally diagnosed with. They think it may be something else, and they've explained to me what they think it might be, and I think there's probably some truth there. And if it is that, as opposed to the original diagnosis, then there are other things that they can do for me, which is exciting. There are going to be other avenues of more longer term and stable pain management, which will help me to get on with my life without collapsing so often and being unable to use my legs, which would be great. But what I'm really thinking about here is people like, I don't know, I guess Shaolin monks. I can't think of any specific examples right now, because I'm doing this video really very much off the cuff. But I'm thinking about groups of spiritual practitioners who actually focus on deleting pain as though it's a part of consciousness which is just about perception, and it's not actually there if you choose for it not to be. I'm kind of interested in that. And I'm interested about how flexible and how malleable and how expansive my spirituality can be with regard to my pain. So that's something that I'm really journeying through. And I just really wanted to make this video to put it out there for those of you who are experiencing chronic pain yourselves and are spiritually centered, because I know when I did my first video, there were people out there who were having similar struggles and giving me words of love and encouragement. And I send those words of love and encouragement back to you 110%. Very, very much love to you all. I wish you strength. I wish you fortitude. through these very difficult times, much love, blessed be,